Hi, today I'm looking at microcontrollers, mainly because we have a requirement at Key Stage 3 and a Key Stage 4 in design technology to at least acknowledge them and access them. This can be done through theoretical, of course, but it's, as in most things in design technology, it's much nicer to actually handle and use the equipment. Now, there are lots of different types available on the market. And I'm just going to limit to the ones that I tend to use or have used within schools for either myself or on training. As you can see, there's a wide range from relatively simple ones right through to more complicated looking devices. Now, the first one I'm going to look at is the Crumble. The Crumble is a very easy to use piece of equipment. It's used within Key Stage 2, 3 and 4. And is relatively easy to use. It connects to PCs, Macs, and there is a Google Chrome extension coming out soon as well, so you should be able to use it on Chromebooks, for example. It's very easy to use because it's all self-contained. It's connected via a USB connector, and there are different pads to either power the actual device or to connect to the other components such as LEDs. The good thing about this is that if you are connecting to these A, B, C and D pads, for LEDs, for example, you don't need to use other components such as resistors, etc. It also has built in the bottom here something called a motor driver. Now, this can run two motors backwards and forwards independently, but more importantly, it can be used to power other devices anywhere up to 5 volts, whereas these ones at the top here, the A, B, C and D, are limited more to around 2 volts. As well as being easy to access, the actual software is very linear. Moving on from that, we then have the BBC Microbit. This particular one is one that's been available in quite a lot of schools now, and it's of course has a matrix display and then lots of different pads that you can attach to. If you're just using it within a normal school environment, unless you've got the connector which allows you to access these additional pins, you can only easily access these pins 0, 1, 2, 3, the voltage and ground. So you're limited to about 3 inputs and outputs. So it has a more limited range. It doesn't start to become more interesting until you start connecting it to a device which allows you to access all of these pins, which are available from several companies, but I particularly use Kitronic and Fortronic for this. The only downside of this is that it doesn't have a motor driver built within it, so that means you have to buy additional equipment. As well as that, if you're already using or have access to something called Pickaxe, you probably won't be looking at this video because you already know how to use the programmable controller. Now, if you have got legacy equipment, but more importantly the cables, it means that you can use a range of different types. These particular two are my favourite. This one is called the Igloo by Kitronic. Now, this is interesting because it's actually designed for use with e-textiles. So each of these pins is connected via conductive thread. I in particular use this one because it's be connected to any device. It doesn't just have to be textiles. You could use crocodile clips, you could use wires, it doesn't really matter. It's a very low cost device, and again has lots of different pads to be able to connect input and output. Again, this doesn't have a motor driver, and so you'd have to do something separate to that. The other one I like is this one by a company called Ixat. It's very similar to the Crumble in the sense that it has lots of different types of outputs, but in particular it has both here the A and the B, a motor driver again to deliver higher voltage, anywhere up to again about 5 or 6 volts to power motors, but again anything that goes up to that sort of voltage. Once we start moving up the scale though, we then start to look at things like Arduino. Now, Arduino and another product called LilyPad, which is also an Arduino, are interesting devices. But again, the only problem with these is that you are starting to get into much more complicated programming language. So it's much harder to do and much harder to use. But Again, it's used with conductive thread on the lily pad, and with the actual Arduino you have these modules that plug straight into it. So very easy to use from a hardware point of view. If I was looking at it though, the reality is I would be looking at using, from a hierarchy of easy to hard to use, I would probably be looking at using the the Crumble, followed by something like an equal type of software would be the Pickaxe, followed by the BBC Microbit. Both of these two types of devices are easy to use on, or rather very similar to use with the software, whereas the Crumble is much easier to use if you've never used microcontrollers before. If you are interested in bespoke courses or even possibly bursary funded courses, please get in touch. Thanks very much.